May 16th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When submitting questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're running. Also, if you could, so if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, or 14, and also which operating system. That information is helpful when kind of answering questions. We should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So with timestamps, so you can quickly navigate to particular topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we have over 39,000 topics. We covered in the last just a little bit over 5 years. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that great website. That's a wonderful resource of information. So you could search, and that will take you directly to that moment in the YouTube video. We also want to give special thanks to two people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees, but they just do this to make it a better community experience. And also we'll give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work on the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful, again, another wonderful resource of kind of a collection of different tutorials, links, and articles that are very relevant for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index on from Stockholm. We have DJFK on again. We have Raw Justice Hip Hop, who's checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland, not far from me, just up the river, a couple miles and across the river. M. Sully asks, question, can Cubase 14 Pro handle inputs from multiple audio interfaces? I'm using a Mac Pro along with an UA Apollo as my main interface, but I'd like to connect my Yamaha THR30 directly for guitar. So if you're doing this, if you're doing it on Mac OS, you might be able to, and this is something that tends not to work very well. So the reason why it's not so common is because when we're dealing with audio interfaces, we have to kind of keep all of the audio synchronized, and that means that they have clocks. So the Yamaha THR30 doesn't really have a clock that could be synchronized to your UA Apollo. So if you're running both interfaces, they're both kind of in a freewheel sync. So what some people could do is if you go to your system, if you look under utilities in your Mac OS, let me just, so we'll look under, so let's say applications, we'll go to utilities, and then in here you'll see a audio MIDI setup, and you could try to, as soon as we come over to, let's say, your audio interface, if you click on the plus sign here, you can create an aggregate device, and here you could choose whether you want, and you could say, okay, I want an input from my THR30 and my UA Apollo, and then once you're inside of Cubase, so you could define those. Now, again, these aren't going to clock properly, so be aware of that, you may have audio that, as you're recording is out of time with the rest of your audio. And then when we go to Cubase here, we go to your studio setup, and we could choose your aggregate audio device from the settings there. So, but generally, it's always going to be better to make sure that your audio ins and outs are in sync with each other. So, if you have the option just to take even a headphone out of your THR30 or line out and connect that into your Apollo, that's always going to be a better choice, because the two streams, that way the guitar will be recorded in sync with your universal audio interface, as opposed to the two interfaces kind of constantly drifting, because those two interfaces, the clocks can't be resolved to each other. All right, Stanislaus Vitort asks, "Hi Greg, I'm often getting an error message after Cubase crashes. Keep my current settings or disable third-party plugins. Any advice on how to stop it, avoiding losing any important configurations?" So generally, like when you get that message, it's often going to be, and you may see at the top, it may indicate like a particular plugin caused a crash. So sometimes what happened in previous versions of Cubase is if the plugin, third-party plugins could sometimes prevent the program from opening up. So if the plugin got corrupted or the plugin is crashing the system, sometimes you couldn't go into Cubase to disable the plugin. So now when you get that message, you have the option where you could choose to disable third-party plugins, you could delete preferences, you could disable preferences, or use the existing preferences. So when you do that, if you do have a plugin that's causing problems, you could get into Cubase and tell Cubase not to use that plugin. So that's why it gives you that option. So just so that you wouldn't be in a loop where a plugin could prevent the program from opening up. So it's always kind of a fail-safe way if you need to go in, open up a project and say, okay, I'm going to remove this plugin from this project, save it as a different version number or as a different version name, and at that point we could open up the project and still continue to work if that plugin was causing problems. So look to see, if at the very top of the message you may say, it may say Cubase, this plugin caused Cubase to crash, and that would give you kind of a heads up. So it kind of gives you a way to start the program in kind of a diagnostic mode, or so that you could actually, open the project if a plugin is preventing it from even launching. All right, great to see Benny from Sweden. We have the artist known as Love. Says, hope everyone's doing great. And he's hit the like button. We have Rick France checking in from the Pacific Northwest. All right, we have Casa Mch. Says as Cubase 14 Pro 14.02. Okay. Thanks for joining us today. All right, wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta, Georgia. Always great to have Kerwin on. Wonderful composer and engineer producer. All right, we see Vince as Fly V checking in from Winnipeg. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, Casa is just asking he's from Algeria, just asking who wants to exchange vocal templates. So I think a great place to start, if you're looking for ways of kind of getting your vocals kind of dialed in, I think a great way to start that, if you haven't played around with this, and this came in 13, where we could go, if you go to the vocals category, to go to the vocal chain. And instead of necessarily like having very convoluted chains of, lots of different third-party plugins for different functions, that here we could have, I think 15 or 16 different processes directly here. So if you wanted to do like, a high pass filter, if you wanted to adjust the noise gate, do pitch correction, de-essing, a dynamic filter, compression, EQ. So if you wanted those to be clean, or if you wanted like an exciter, saturator kind of in a character, or if you wanted a different compressor for character versus what we have here. So we could just choose kind of different choices of compressor. So you could have like 2 stages of compression. Again, dynamic, you could have kind of your parametric EQ, de-esser plus imager if you want to make sound wider, delay, and reverb. And this will come with a series of presets. So you can really just kind of come over very easily and check out the presets that come with the vocal chain. And that's a great resource if you're kind of just starting with particular vocals, that now you could open up the vocal chain and be able to see and start playing and maybe modifying some of the existing presets. All right, wonderful to see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. All right, Parabot 2 sending greetings from everyone from Australia. Thanks for joining us. I'm just what part of Australia are you in? It's one of my favorite countries I've visited. Got to go to Melbourne, Sydney, and Wangaratta. Great time. All right, we have Dean Garvey Jazz checking in from the Southern Sierra north of Los Angeles. Wonderful to see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Uno Momento, loyal attendee, and someone running Steinberg longer than myself checking in from Finland. All right, Karan Thapa says, I'm switching to Cubase from FL Studios. Cubase easier to use than FL. So I think that, what I've seen people, and I don't run FL, but I think that once you see Cubase, and, the thing that I think is really good about it is it doesn't kind of predispose a workflow on you. Sometimes, you see people writing very similar music because they use the same programs, because it kind of, leads you into, like, I would say it leads you down a path. Whereas I don't think Cubase, I think the features are very easy to access, but anytime you need a very complex functionality to solve a solution, that it's going to be there, but it's not always in your face and kind of impending your workflow. So I think you'll have a great time with Cubase, and anytime that you have questions in your transition, that's why we do these live streams, and you could use this as kind of a resource, and check out the Cubase index to help in your transition. And we're all here just in support as a community to help people use their Cubase better. And we see the Karan's from India, but I think joining the live stream is a great way to get started on your Cubase journey. And welcome to the family. All right, so we see Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island, Barn Door Recording. Great to see you on. All right, so we see Robert Lofgren says, latest Nuendo simple project with imported WAV files processed with Melodyne for MIDI extraction. Project takes several minutes to load. What can I do? So I don't have Melodyne on this computer. I have it on my personal studio computer. But what I would try to do is, if we've done some processing, so let's say if we're here and we've done processing through an ARA extension, so I'm assuming that maybe you did it with an ARA extension, and once you've done kind of the MIDI extraction, so let's say if we're here and we've done all of the editing, sometimes that can make, all of those edits can end up in the project, like, all the edits could be contained within the project file, so sometimes that project file may get very large. But once you're done, what I would perhaps do is, try to make the extension permanent if you want, or if you've extracted the MIDI, maybe just choose no extension and see if that changes your loading or saving times with that. So if it's already kind of done its process and you've extracted to MIDI, you may not need to have the Melodyne active on that particular part. And if that's the case, then maybe unloading the extension or just making the extension permanent right here from the inspector. All right, so we have Roland stuff checking in from Sussex, England. We have Estes Labs checking in from the Bahamas. I was just curious if that's Chris Estes. If it is, I hope you're doing well. Chris is a super smart, evil smart inventor guy. I've known when he lived in Nashville. All right, we have Braxel checking in from Fort Worth, Texas. All right, Balsa asks, is there an option to A/B two different insert chains on a single track? Okay, so let's take a look at it. So I think we could do this with MixConsole snapshots. So let's come over and let's say if I come over here and I want to put a couple of insert chains and I want to A/B them. So let's say I have just a quick drum loop. All right, and I wanted to put, we'll just say a delay. We'll just make this make it sound really obnoxious. Let's put black valve compressor on it. Let's put maybe a chopper or something. All right, so let's say we have that as one of my plug-in chains. So what I could do is I'm going to go into the MixConsole here, and let's just take, we see this little camera, so I'm going to save a MixConsole snapshot. Okay, now I'm going to come over and let's say, okay, I want like a reverb. And let's put on all right, so let's say I have this as my snapshot. So when we go into like our standalone mixer, we could go to our snapshots and let's go to our snapshot recall setting. So I want to do it only for selected channels. And now what I want to do is come over here and I just want to A/B just the inserts on the selected channels. So let's say we're playing this and we can see my inserts here. I'm going to select that channel and let's go to snapshot 1. So we'll come over here. Let's see if I... Alright, let me make sure I did the snapshots right. Okay, I'm going to just check my recall settings. Okay, let me just do another, so let me just do our other snapshot here. So let's say I did my mono delay. Let's do chopper. All right, so now let's take a snapshot of that. Okay. Okay, so now we're here. I could recall. So I'm going to my MixConsole snapshot settings. I'm just going to do it on the selected channel. And now I'm going to come over here. You can see that we have our different insert chains. And I want to go to snapshot 2. So you can do that across all of your tracks. And once you take a snapshot of it, you could just recall those snapshots when you go to the settings on selected channels only. And that will allow you to kind of create different chains. And I think you have up to 8 different snapshots. So you can do that on one track or across an entire mix. And you could include other elements besides the inserts. So if you wanted to, recall the pre-section where you have, phase, low and high cut filters, EQs, channel strip, sends, pan, volume, then you could do that or just limit it to one particular type of element within the MixConsole. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. Tony Trunzo from Australia saying hello. Okay, so we see Fly V's having some problems with his hotkeys in the new PC, so he's recovering them today. Yeah, let me know if you need any help with that or have any questions. Braxel says if he whacks the like button, he may break his mouse, but he'll click it. We appreciate that. All right, we have Anja Brits saying hey from Johannesburg, South Africa. All right, we have Rifat sending greetings from Bodrum. All right, and we have Helmut Kerner checking in from Austria, saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Casa just says, oh yes, he always uses the vocal chain plugin. All right, great to see Terry Gray from Minneapolis. I was thinking of you. My nephew is going to Minneapolis tomorrow, starting an internship for the summer. All right, Parabat 2's from Melbourne. Beautiful city. I had a great time there. Thanks for letting me know. All right, Helmut Herner asks, hi Greg, can I apply a fade in and fade out to an audio clip with one keyboard shortcut? All right, so let's say if I come here, so if we have the range tool, so like if I have a range selected here, and then I think if I hit A, it'll automatically, if the end of the clip is selected, it will automatically do it based on from that point to the end. And if I do it from the beginning and hit the letter A, and this is like fades to range. But the trick is I could also just come right over here, and if I select the middle, so say I want this, and I want to fade into here and a fade out after that, and then when I hit A, we could do a fade in and fade out just on the selected, around the selected range just by hitting the A as an apple. So we could just come over here, select a particular range, hit the A key, and we could do a fade in and a fade out on the clip. So we're just selecting the part of the clip that we don't want to be involved with the fade. And then when you hit the letter A, up to that point, up to the selection will be faded in. After that selection will be faded out. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Benny from Sweden is asking, the on-screen keyboard pops up every now and then. It bothers me. Can I turn it off completely so it doesn't pop up anymore? I don't use it. Cubase 14. So it's basically just going to be Option plus K will bring up the on-screen keyboard. So if maybe you're accidentally hitting that keyboard shortcut, maybe instead of Control or Command K, that you're hitting the wrong modifier key. If you find that it's it's always just being annoying for you, just try going to the key commands, and you could just click here, and you could just hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, and you'll see that this will open up the on-screen keyboard. And this, if you just change this shortcut or delete, you see this will remove the key command shortcut. So maybe if you delete that shortcut, because that's how it's opened up, so maybe you're accidentally hitting the wrong modifier key or the wrong key command. So maybe if you remove that key command, that could prevent that from, when you hit the wrong keyboard shortcut, that could prevent it from opening up. So give that a try. Let me know how it works for you, Benny. All right, Balsa just asks, does Cubase 14 have a granular insert effect? Can Pad Shop be an insert effect instead of an instrument? So it doesn't have really a granular insert effect, but any audio file in Pad Shop will function as a VST instrument. But any audio file that you take into, so let's say if I come over here, we add a Pad Shop. So I could so let's just load up a quick preset here, and let me just make sure it's not muted. So I could take any audio file here and drag and drop and do granular synthesis. So while it's not like real time that it's going to do that as like an effect, any audio sample or any audio file could be dragged and dropped, and you could do the granular processing inside a Pad Shop right there. All right, we have Kai Nunert Photography just saying, sending greetings from Munich. Always wanted to go there. All right, we see from Estes Labs, says, I'm experiencing an issue on my Mac Studio M2 where the Cubase performance meter is maxed out, buffer 2048, but Mac resource meter shows less than 50% of CPU's power used. Multiprocessing is enabled. So it can really depend upon how it's actually set up. So Cubase will utilize all of the processors, but if everything is going on a single track, those, and if it's kind of in a serial processing fashion where you have like 16 inserts all on one track, that's going to slow down the audio performance. And there's a distinction between audio performance and like CPU performance. So what you see in the CPU performance often is going to be quite different. So I think I have a project to kind of illustrate this. So. And if you have one virtual instrument that's playing back like 16 different voices, at that point, that's only utilizing one CPU cord. So one track can't access, and every DAW works the same way, can't access, multiple CPU cores. So one track is going to be on. So let's take a look. All right, so if I go over here, let me just. All right, so I'm going to just select all these, and let me just toggle All right, so let's look at, I'm going to disable this particular track here. Okay, so this track, and I call it the multi-insert. We have, let's say, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 multi-tap delays. And I chose this particular preset because this particular preset is like running 7 or 8 plugins within one plugin. So this one particular preset takes a lot of CPU. So, and then what I did is we have 8 tracks that have one instance of the same CPU, of the same plugin, and then I put one track with 8 instances of it. So I'll disable this particular track here. So each of these tracks has one instance of that plugin, so same settings. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the CPU resources here. So, and I'll just turn this down because it's kind of nonsensical audio, but we're going to play audio here. And we see that 8 tracks of audio playing through each of those tracks, doing one insert is it's not hard to do for the computer because each of these tracks can go to a different CPU. So it can allocate the CPU resources. Now let's disable these tracks and let's play just the track that is, so I'm going to disable those tracks. And now this track, so we think, oh, it's the same number of effect plugins. So when I enable this track, now this one track can only use one CPU core. So now when we play this, if we look at our audio performance meter, we can see that this is having a hard time keeping up and can barely play because the CPU, and we could actually kind of determine the dropouts on that. And that's because all of these plugins are hitting one CPU core as opposed to being spread across different CPU cores. So at that point, you could maybe, send it to, duplicate the track, and run the 4 additional, if you had to run 8 plugins, 8 inserts on one track, duplicate the track, run 4 inserts on one, run 4 inserts on the other track, so that's often what happens. So, the CPU performance meter that you see in the computer doesn't have much to do with the actual audio performance and how audio is processed on your computer. And again, every DAW will work kind of the same way. All right, so we see from Parabot 2, Cubase is killer. It has so many great features. All right, we have Neil Conway checking in, I believe from Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. All right. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue just asking, did something change with the LUFS meter in the last update with Cubase 14? Mine looks different. All right, so let me just come over here. Just disable this. So I think it looks the same. So let's say if we come over here. So just turn this off. And so as we come over, so there's kind of the dB meter here and then the loudness meter. So within kind of the latest version here, I'll just drop this down so we can maybe see it a little easier. I think like in 14 there's some there were some cosmetic changes with regards to the control room to kind of make that more in contemporary user interface design in line with other parts of the program, but I think it's pretty identical to what we're seeing here. So, but make sure that you have like the settings, the meter settings, like if you had it running at minus 23 LUFS or minus 14 LUFS, that can make a difference. There's also the ability, if you go to the meter area here, like in the control room, one of the things I think that changed was, we could, in the control room, if we wanted to like see the meters here, that there was a change, but I think that the actual loudness unit meter is going to be identical between, since it's been incorporated into the control room. So, but I think that you could do like the meters here in the control room, and let me just see if it's, I think it's, but there was a way that where you could see kind of like the meters. I think it's still in there. Let me see if I could find it. But where you could see kind of a tiny meter within the, or maybe it's in, if we go into the meter area here, that there was a way to kind of have the like the control room meter volume, but I don't think that was with the loudness units. But I think that there may have been some cosmetic changes, but I think everything is everything is kind of functionally the same. All right, so we see it is Chris Estes from Estes Labs. So I hope you and Amy are well, and life is treating you and your family great. All right, Karan Thapa asks, I'm having this issue where the audio or MIDI notes plays slightly before the playhead even reaches there. So, one thing to check is, so let's say if we have like an audio file here, there is like a track delay. So make sure, just out of curiosity, if you look over here, that when you look at a particular track, we see that this starts at measure 1, beat 1, 16th note 1, but there is on a particular track, there is a pre-delay that could be applied that could cause that. So just make sure sometimes when people go to adjust panning, you may kind of go to the wrong area, and you may be just adjusting kind of the pre or post delay for the event. So make sure, and you could do this for kind of the track or for the event. I believe this is going to be just for the track. So make sure that you don't have any actual delay times set here. So if just kind of come over here and we type our value of 0, then you could just see it automatically. So see if that makes a difference for you. Okay, so Kai Nunert asks, says, when I add sends, in which order are they applied to the respective track? For inserts, it's clear, but with sends, I don't understand it. And is the EQ from the channel strip always the last? Okay, so when we go to a channel strip, all right, so okay, so we open up our channel strip. We could see as elements come into our particular signal flow. So we see inserts, and these inserts will be serial, so that the processing will go, so if we have a reverb here, that reverb and a delay and a compressor, that the reverb is then fed into the delay, into the compressor, etc. So these are all serial. When we look at our channel strip, we could see, so the EQ is not always last. When we look at our channel strip, we could come over here and say, okay, I want the noise gate. We have a tube compressor, let's say a de-esser for a vocal. I wanted magneto tape saturation and a brick wall limiter. So the EQ is, as we can see here, this would go from left to right for the signal flow. So if I wanted the EQ to come between the noise gate and a compressor, we could just drag and change the signal flow. Now, by default, generally the channel strip comes after the inserts in the signal flow, but that could be switched by just simply clicking on this little icon. So now the inserts would come in the signal before the channel strip, or the channel strip comes before the inserts. So we could toggle that. Now, as we work with sends, the audio would be processed through the inserts, through the channel strip, and then go out to sends. Now, there's no particular order, because the sends, instead of being serial, where these are feeding into each other, the sends are parallel. So this way, if we have a reverb and a delay, the reverb doesn't get sent into the delay, but this source gets sent to the reverb, which then is being sent to the effects channel, and it's also being sent at the same time to the delay effects channel. So this way we don't have the reverb being delayed, being compressed, being EQ'd, going through all of these. The reverb can be sent parallel out. So these really, the order isn't critical, because these sends are sending it out in parallel to multiple destinations, often to effects, or it could be different groups. So at that point, these are parallel, these are serial. The EQ can be placed, very flexibly and, within the channel strip for the signal flow, and the channel strip can be placed before the inserts by clicking on this little icon here in signal flow, and you could toggle which comes first, the channel strip or inserts. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, so we see Cornell from the Netherlands had a question he wanted to ask, but he forgot it. So that was Michael Team's advice in the last live stream. They have to write them down. So hopefully something will trigger your memory. But thanks for joining us anyway. Wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, and always great to see Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. All right, so we see from Vince, says, how do I set up a key command to trim events to MIDI notes? Okay, I think I did a macro for this, and I'm sure it's on my old computer, but let's see if we could figure out a quick macro for that. All right, so let's say on this, I'm going to have MIDI events here and MIDI events there. Okay, so we have kind of dead space at the beginning, and we want to maybe trim this event based upon its content. Okay, so let's say if I go into the editor, we select all. I'm going to put my left and right locators, and let's say if we come over here to range, we could say, let's see if we could. All right. Okay, so and I think if we had kind of the range set up, let me see if I could do this in kind of macro way. So if we open the key editor, select all of the notes in the key editor, hit the P key, and let's say if we go to let's see if we select all right, so let me see if I could get the range set up. I may have to add maybe a marker track, but let me see. All right, so let's get our macros started here. So let's go to our key commands, and let's go over to macro. So let's call this trim MIDI event. Okay, so we'll call trim MIDI event to notes. All right, so let's open an editor. All right, let's see if we can do it maybe with the in-place editor. We might be able to. Yeah, let's. Okay, so let's add that. So let's say. So we're going to have this event selected. Let me remove that and let's try open key editor in the lower zone. So let's add that command. I'm going to delete this. All right, so we'll run this. It's going to open that editor. Let's now select all notes. We'll just do select all. Just do. All right, so we're going to do select all command. And then we want to set the left and right locators around the event. All right, so now if I'm here, I don't have anything selected, so I'm just going to select this. We'll set the left and right locators around the event. Let's navigate to left locator. So if I come over here, it's going to hit the 1 key on the numeric keypad. So we'll say go to left locator. And then let's just do a split at cursor. Okay, so let's say if we're starting from scratch here, we'll test where we're going. So what I want to do is maybe move to the left locator and then cut this event, move to the right locator and cut that event. So let's see if we get this all working so far in our macro. So we'll come here. Okay, let's see if it's split. See if it split it at the cursor. Didn't look like it split. Okay, so let me go back to, I need to change the window area focus to back to the project window. Okay. So now we want to navigate back. So I'm going to come here. So this way we went from the focus from the key editor back to the project window. I want to now come over here. We'll say left. Let's add the command. And then we're going to hit the delete key. Okay, so let's say if we have this all going, let's see if this is working so far. All right, let me just. All right, so let's see if we can now delete. Okay, so let's move this. So let's see if now we'll trim the front. All right, now we're going to navigate to the right edge. Go to the right locator, add that command. Then split at cursor. Okay, so let's come over here, split at cursor. Let's add that command. So we're going to go to the right locator, split at cursor. Let's navigate to the right. Add that command, followed by the delete key, add. Okay, so let me just try this. I'll move my left and right locators over here. We'll start with our MixConsole. So now we'll trim them. So we'll just come right over here. All right. So may have to navigate right twice. Yep, okay, so that's it. All right, so if you want to create a macro, and now you could assign a keyboard shortcut for the macro. This is the macro that you can make. All right, so what we want, let's see if I can make this taller. All right, so if we choose editors, open key editor in the lower zone, edit, select all, we're going to select all the notes. We're going to set the left and right locators to the selection. So, and then we're going to move to the left locator. We're going to navigate to the left to select the part that we split. So we're going to split at the locator, split at the cursor. Then we're going to navigate to select the event before. We're going to delete that. We're going to navigate twice. We're going to navigate to the right locator. Transport, go to right locator. We're going to split at cursor. We're going to, since we have, we're going to then navigate twice so that we go select this event, select the event at the end, and then we're going to delete the event at the end. So once we have this macro set up, we'll say trim MIDI events based on the notes. So I'm just going to have that track and that event selected. And let's run the macro. So we're basically going to trim the start and end where there's no MIDI notes. Run the macro. And now the the event is only as long as the MIDI notes are. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So again, if you want to copy this over, editors, open key editor in lower zone, select all the notes. We want to set the left and right locators around the first and end notes. We want to navigate to the left locator. We're going to switch the focus from the key editor back to the project window. So focus back. We're going to split at we're going to go to the left locator. We're going to split at the cursor. We're going to navigate left to delete that event. Go to the right locator. We're going to split at the cursor. So right at the end. We're going to navigate right twice and then delete the last, kind of the tail end with no data. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Vince. All right, always wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas on. I believe the ice cream distribution will begin. We have Ziabram Marbay just checking in, saying hello, folks. Thanks for joining us. All right, let me just find my spot. My chat field jumped. All right, so Karan Thapa asks, also, what is the purpose of MixConsole 1, 2, 3, and so on? So it could be that when we go to your MixConsole, like here, we could see all of our channels. Now, let's say I was doing a live recording and I just only wanted to see my input channels. I can now have a MixConsole set up and we could go to different configurations. And here I can say, I only want to see my input channels. Or Mixer 3, I just want to see my groups and effects. So when I come over, we'll say, okay, let's go to our configuration. I want to see group and effect and VCA channels. Or I only want to see instrument and MIDI tracks. So we could have different mixers that show us different types of data. So, you know, don't have to necessarily scroll. We could just say, okay, I want to see my inputs while I'm tracking. I want to see my groups and effects during mixing. I want to see only MIDI. I want to see only audio. So each of those mixers can have an independent configuration so that when you jump over, you could just see the exact channels that you want in your MixConsole. All right, you see Michael Teens is like number 48. Great to see Soren from Sweden back. He's going to be checking replay. All right. You have Recyclop checking in from Finland. All right. See Jazz Dude posting about don't make this loudness units your Luft's mistake tutorial. All right, so we see Balsa asking, are modulators that control insert effects saved all together when creating FX chain presets? I think they're independent, but let me just test just to make sure. So I think if you wanted to save them, so let's come over to this track here. Adjust my MIDI controller here. All right, hang on a second, let me shut something off. All right. Just had to turn something off with Alexa. All right. So let's say we have like a modulation matrix here. So let's, or just modulators. Okay. So, and because the modulators don't necessarily, can do other things besides an insert effect. So let's say we have, all right, so right now I have the volume modulated, and I have the cutoff being modulated. So I have an insert and that particular track. So now if we saved this effects chain, I think it's just going to save the particular insert effect. So because it's not necessarily the modulation, but I think we could save the modulation with it if we wanted to. All right, so we'll come over here to our inserts. So let's say we turn this on. Okay. Sorry, let me just. I'll just open up the. All right, so I'm going to save an effects chain preset. Call it modulator. Okay, so now when we go to add a track, we will come over to our user presets and let's go to effects chain presets. So it's a modulator. So I think that this is, and we go open up the modulator for the track. There's no modulators, but if we want to save all this information, one of the things that we might be able to do is to export the selected track. So we'll say, okay, and we'll call this modulator. So if we want to be able to save the modulators, I can come over here. So let's save it to, I'll just say a underscore, so it shows up first. And now if I go to import, so we export the selected tracks, but we import a track archive. So now when we come over here, let's import this. And we can see that this is the new track. That's the original track. And here's a new track. And we had the same modulators. So the modulators, can affect the inserts. But, when you do an effects chain preset, it's recalling all of the inserts. But if you wanted to recall the modulators, export it as a track, export selected tracks and import it as the track archive. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, Terry Gray says that fade in and out via selected range is incredible. I learned something new each stream. So that's great. I think it's kind of an interesting format that people learn from other people's questions. And we see Karan just says that fade in, fade out shortcut was super helpful. Thanks. All right, Neil Conway just says to Michael Teams that ice cream is great right now in Oregon. The sun is up and he's building a 12 by 40 chicken house and to run on the homestead. All right, so we see Tim K from Zeist. And you don't have to apologize for being late. We're not in school. And his cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Mark Raven's dog Stella and other pets. My cat found a new shoebox. So the cat has been in the shoebox for the last 4 or 5 hours. I had to buy sandals more for him. All right, so you see Helmet just says, thanks a lot. That's what I was looking for. So it's great. Glad it was helpful. All right, so we see Benny just says, thanks, Greg. All right, Neil Conway, his cat, Miss Priss, waves somewhat dismissively to Buddy. Tony Trunzo asks, Greg, is there a way to rename the mixer snapshots? All right, so let's come over here to our MixConsole snapshots. So say we take a snapshot here. Then let's see if we come over here to the settings. Let me see if there's, I thought there was a way to do it. Let me just, see if it's maybe in full screen mixer. So we come over here, we see snapshots in the full screen mixer because we see these additional, let me just see if these are available anyway. All right, so once we're in kind of the standalone mixer, we get where we could see the history. So we can see all these, and then we see the snapshots. And now we could just name these Tony Trunzo. And you could name these particular MixConsole snapshots from here. Maybe not from the lower zone, but if you hit F3 by default, that should take you into the full screen mixer. And then you will see these inspector tabs on the upper left-hand side. And get snapshots, double click, and rename your MixConsole snapshot there. All right, Best Korean Jesus is lurking in San Diego, but he says we already know that. So always great for you to just kind of pop in and just say hi. All right, so we have Milo Stoshik sending greetings from Oslo. Thanks for joining us. All right, John Barry joining from a sunny English Riviera. All right, so we see what is the fastest way to turn an insert on a track into a send effect on the same track. Clicking and dragging the plugin from insert slot to send slot doesn't work. Okay, let's try a couple things. Yeah, generally they're going to be different entities. So let's say if I want to, let's say, copy the volume setting, and let's see if come here. So I don't think there's a direct way. The dragging and dropping doesn't work because it's, let me just open up a particular channel. All right, so let's say we do a mono delay. We're going to do quarter note. All right, so let's say, so it may not be like a super like direct, like to take it on the same track, you know, because we're copying something that's on this particular track to, you know, when we do it as an insert, and when we use a send, it's going to a different track. So let's say if I come over here and I copy the setting, I go to add an insert. Let's say I add an effects track. All right, and I'll choose no effect. All right, so we have our effects track here. We could open that, and let's see if we could paste. All right, so let's. All right, so even if I come over here, let's say, so right now I have this effect. All right, so I have this insert here, and if I want this mono delay, I could now drag it to the insert slot. And at that point, it's the same. So when I come over here, I could just choose to send it to FX02. But, you know, when we do this, this is like, you know, like on the particular track, and this is being sent to a different destination. So it's not like, oh, just kind of drag and drop it here, because they're kind of, you know, while it seems like it's kind of the same area, where the actual plugin resides for the processing is really different. So you may have to create an empty effects channel track and copy to that, and then add the routing to the effects channel track. So there could be a chance of doing be a tricky macro to do, but that's probably the cleanest, easiest way to do it. You know, you could always say presets, but then the gain structure could be very different as well, using as an insert versus a send. But if you create an empty effects channel, then drag it over, and then just simply activate the send there, then that could speed up the process. All right. Let's see. Michael Teams has granted Tim K. in Zeist, Netherlands, 1 gallon of strawberry ice cream. Sounds good. All right. Braxel said he went to La Hacienda Ranch and had steak fajitas. The place was packed. All right. Wonderful to see Val from Vienna, sending a very enthusiastic Cubase with many, many exclamation points. All right, Balsa asks, says, I have 2 piano VSTs split the keyboard range, one playing lower half, one higher half. Can I link them so I click on one track, both are selected without control clicking on both every time? Okay, so let's say if I have kind of a piano part here, I'll just duplicate this track and I'll split. Let me get the right track. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and let's say above, just make this a little larger to see. Okay. All right, so let's say above these notes here. Okay, so let's say I want to, okay, so let's say I have these two piano parts. So one is maybe left hand, right hand. So let's say if I come here, so one of the things that you could probably do is just select both events and then hit Command or Control plus the letter G, like Greg. And now when you double click, you can see both events, and then when you want to edit one versus the other, so this way they're always kind of selected, but when you're in the MIDI editor, we can just come right over here and select which particular voice that we're editing here. But both of them will be kind of linked so that if I do an edit on one, it's moved, and if I double click on one, both would be opened in the editor, and then you could just kind of toggle back and forth between the two different, which is active for editing between that. So again, select the two events, hit Control or Command plus the letter G to group. So you could do group editing, and then to ungroup them, it would be Command or Control plus the letter U. And then they would function independently. So group them together, and then you can edit kind of without affecting the others, and double click and see both events right there. All right, so Kai asks one more question. You could ask as many as you want, no limits. It says, when I cut an event and I want to move it into relation to the beat, for example, 1/4, but it always snaps to the grid, but I want that it snaps to the grid in relation to where I cut it. Okay, so we would just switch our mode here to grid relative. So you may see it by grid. So let's say if I cut in the middle of the bar here, so I'm going to turn off my snap, and I'll just move this kind of out of the way so we can see it a little easier. Okay, so let's say I want to take this particular event here. I'm going to cut, let's say where these events, all right, so I cut here. Okay, so right now, this is only going to, when I turn on my snap by hitting the letter J, this would snap kind of to the beginning of the measure. But if we have this set to grid relative, so if I cut, let's say right here, I'm going to turn off my snap, and let's say I want to cut right there, and then grid relative is turned on. So I'm going to turn my grid on. Now it's going to snap, and we see that where it was here, so we weren't on the grid. But now I want it to snap to bars but keep its position relative. So now it's going to snap not to the grid but relative to the grid. So if I didn't do it exactly on beat, let's say if I cut in the middle of a beat here, so now I wanted that to, again, snap to grid relative. So now it's not snapping directly to the grid, but relative to the grid. So again, switch here from grid to grid relative, and then that will do just what you want. All right, Michael Teams has granted Braxel 1 gallon of Texas fresh blackberry ice cream, and gave Braxel a good tip on the steakhouse, I guess. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz just asked, how much does setting low latency, example 6 milliseconds, affect audio performance? It could depend on, there's a lot of factors. So the performance will, if you're running at the lowest, most people comfortably run at a latency of like 256 samples. So when you're running, but if you have let's say a display driver that likes to interrupt audio performance, that could make 6 milliseconds hard to work with. And if you make adjustments in your display driver that make it more friendly for audio performance, at that point, it could run fine. So, so every song may present it's hard to have an exact setting or exact value to share, because one plugin or one plugin chain on a project like we saw earlier, that plugin chain can cause problems. But if you had the same project without one track that had 6 plugins on it, that could push you over the edge, where 6 milliseconds may work without it and it may not work with it. So every song is going to be different. So after a while, you kind of get a sense of, you could start with a lower buffer size and then as needed, increase the buffer size or render some tracks so that it will, be able to free up audio performance for you. All right, we have Limo Main Switch is watching from Bloemfontein in Bloemfontein in South Africa. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the live stream. Val in Vienna is asking, how's everyone around the world, guys? All right. Neil Conway is doing great. Jurazi Eternal just says, is this Greg? So yeah, I'm Greg. Braxel says Santa Claus. All right. All right, great to see Daniela Da Vinci Girl on. And Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of Moose Tracks ice cream. See, Val says, been using Cubase 15 years, did not know we could pre or post channel strip. Channel strip the inserts. Is there a preference to have it like that always before the inserts? I don't think there's a preference, but if you set up a template with it, those settings will stick within the template or within your song. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue says it was setting about why the LUFS meter was looking different. So he says it was setting all the way to the right of the LUFS meter. It's back to normal. Thanks, Greg. So maybe it's... Oh, yeah, it's this one. Sorry. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. So, yeah, you could have it look like that so you can see the control room volume when you're doing the metering. So, Thanks for resolving my brain cramp, Dallas. Appreciate it. All right, so we see. So from Kai says, yes, thank you. John Barry says, question following on from the channel strip. Let's see if it comes in. All right. All right. So John Barry says, following on from an earlier question, how do you select having your send pre or post pre or post insert, please? So generally the sends are going to be always post insert. So, if you wanted to have a pre insert, so let's say, if we have an audio track here, if we wanted it to be, if we wanted to switch it to be like pre-insert fades, what we could do is take this particular track, and route it to a group. So let's say if we come here, John, let's say I want to now add a group track to the selected channel. And then on the group track, so we could have the, so I guess you could try this. So now if we want it, all right, so if you have effects, so let's say we have our channel here. So let's say we have an effects channel on this vocal. So we're going to add an effects track to this. So let's say, okay, I want a verb. And we just created group 1. So I'm going to send its audio outputs to group 1. So now this reverb, you could try taking this, so these sends will be coming before that. Now if this is all going to the same, so let's say we go to this channel, so maybe we send it to the group, and the group we put the inserts on as well. So this way, if we want to put a delay, or let's say, probably not a delay, let's put maybe an EQ or compressor. So let's say, okay, we come over here, we put a frequency EQ on. So as we put since the effect, the channel is going out to the group, this effect send is also going to the same group. And then we could have these inserts on a group be post fader if you want it. So that may be a way to do like post fader or post fader inserts, or let me just see if that makes sense. I'm just going to reread it again. Have your send pre or post insert. So if you wanted to be have the send pre-insert, send it into a group and send that effects channel, send the track and the effects channel into the group, and then you could process that group or the effects channel itself. This is probably even an easier way if you go to your effects channel. So once you open up your effects channel, your effects show up as an insert, and then you could even just on your effects channel just say, okay, I want a compression. So let's say you go to your dynamics. So just on your effects channel, you could have up to 16 different you could have up to 16 different effects. And this way, when you go into the sends, this probably makes more sense this way. So when you send it to an effects channel track, you could have the inserts show up before the effects channel track. So on the effects channel track, you could stack multiple plugins, and that way those plugins could be set up so whether you want it to be pre or post inserts for the send. Sorry for going down a wrong path at the start there. So let me know if that makes sense for you, John. Thanks for joining us today. All right, DaVinci Girl says, I'm looking for a preset for the M audio axiom in Cubase 12. Main problem, I like to use it mainly to set channels to control other controllers and generators. So I don't think that M Audio is generated like a remote control script. So, and let me know, Daniela, you say I use it mainly to set channels to control other controllers and generators. Could you let me know some specifics? Like, say, I want to run this on that, or I want to control this from the controller. If you give me some more information, I could probably show you how to do it. Sorry for not understanding. All right, John Barry just has a question to the group. Has anyone used a DC remover on their mains power? So I know kind of in relation to audio, one of my mastering engineering friends, one of the things that he always does that he's very adept at is to, and something, let me clear my throat. Something that he does in all of his mastering projects, and he'll call up like some of the best mastering engineers and producers. He's like, you realize that you had DC offset all over your master. He's like, what? So, one of the things that you could do if it is affecting your audio, if you have a DC offset, is just to do the remove DC offset. So anytime I'm doing mastering after learning this lesson from Greg Lukens the hard way, always, if you see like your waveforms where their symmetry between the positive and negative values on the amplitude is kind of skewed like in one direction, removing DC offset. But if anyone else has done DC removers on their power, they could chime in as well. Wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil, and Pastoral Apologetics from Southeast Texas in Steinberg country. He says, I just had my brother and his family up visiting this week, and my brother up last week visiting from Houston. All right, Tiago just says he's very impressed by the Quadrofuzz plugin. It's a hidden monster plugin. It's great. All right, Greg Malik says, version 14 Pro, why aren't my audio connections saved? I have to reset every time I open up Cubase. So make sure that, generally, like every time I open up my Cubase 14 on my Windows, laptop, desktop, or my Mac, they will always be retained unless it's not seeing the audio interface when Cubase is starting up. So I'm assuming that you've started the audio interface before launching Cubase. Make sure that nothing else is, if you don't have the audio interface to kind of share in the background, so maybe try going to, if you go to your studio setup here, and make sure that in the audio system, that release driver when application is in background, you could try toggling that to see if it makes a difference. But generally, the only time that comes up for me is when I've started without that audio interface connected, or the computer operating system isn't seeing the audio interface when it starts up. And then Cubase will say, okay, we don't see the audio interface from last time. What do you want us to send audio through? So that's generally what causes that to have to be reset, is something in the operating system that's kind of has exclusive control over the audio interface, or it's kind of hogging it and not allowing other programs to see it or to be able to access it. All right. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, it just says the Axiom is from 2008, and M Audio did have a controller editor for XP. I know there must be a preset available somewhere because one of your moderators did have the Axiom. It runs on my Fairlight. So, so Danielle, if you just, so if you want to configure it for the MIDI remote, you could just simply, come right over here, and you don't have to, so, and again, if you have a chance to share exactly, what you want to do with it. So, but, if it is transmitting MIDI CC data, all you have to do is, once you're in, let me just see if I can get this, another controller configured here real quickly. I have to find a cable buried behind my desk. All right, so let's say I want to come over and I'm going to connect this choice OS controller. So I'm going to just simply disable this control for now. So you don't even, if you're using it as a MIDI remote, you don't have to know exactly, what's going on with the script. So we'll come over here. So, I'm not sure if you are trying to do, what exactly you're trying to control, but but if we wanted to get it going with our Cubase, we would just come over here for creating a new one, click on the plus sign. We don't have to have so I'm going to come over here. I'll just select, we'll add a vendor. We'll call this May 16, 2025. Okay, and we'll call this 60, say 8 fader. Okay, and then what I want to do is say, okay, I'm going to use, this is my MIDI input and output ports. Okay. All right. Okay. So just see your comment, Danielle. It says it runs. I like to use it in every DAW with the VL70 as generator. So once you connect the controller to your computer, check, when you hit the controller here. So if you just wanted to actually play, so you come over here, just make sure that you have MIDI communication. So when you hit the keys on your controller, if it's connected via USB, and this is if it has, if it's being seen by the operating system, when we come over and hit keys, you'll see in the lower right-hand corner that we have MIDI indicators. We could go to a MIDI track. So let's say if I want to come over here, let's go to just a quick MIDI track. Go to, if you want to establish communications, all you have to do is you can check also as a MIDI insert and just say, okay, we want to go to your MIDI monitor. So, and now when I hit notes, you see that we have MIDI communication. All right. Now to do this, make sure that you may see that by default, you may say all MIDI inputs. So, you could do that and see if you see you should see your M Audio controller right over here. So, and if you see it there, then it's no problem. All right. And you see some more comments coming in. All right. So you want to use that as the VL70 as your generator. So at that point, we want to just make sure that you have a MIDI track. All right, we're going to set the MIDI input here. You could set it to all MIDI inputs or directly to your M Audio. And this is just looking at it directly from the, directly from what is being seen by the computer's operating system. So if you don't see the M Audio here, the computer is not seeing it. And then just make sure that the output that you have for the MIDI output is to wherever your VL70M is connected to. And then just add, here you can set the MIDI channel. So set the appropriate MIDI channel right there and add the track. So once you have your MIDI track here, make sure that we send MIDI to the track. So any incoming MIDI will be sent out to this particular track as soon as the record enable is turned on. So, all right, so I just see the main problem is the channel and program settings to change. So if you want to send, on your MIDI track here, once we come over, so we could, again, I'll just do a brand new project here. So let's say new project. Let's add our MIDI track. So we're going to say it's coming from my panorama P4. The outputs, I'm going to say it's going out to my choice os controller. We're going to name this VL70. All right, and now that we can see our channels here. So we could choose our channels, and then we'll have our bank select and program change directly there. All right, so here you'd set the channel. So generally most MIDI controllers don't kind of transmit on all channels, and it's kind of filtered and the channels are sent directly here, but in all your program changes. And if you're hitting like a program change button on the device, make sure it's actually transmitting a MIDI program change by going into your MIDI monitor. And then as you hit the program change button, see if it's actually sending a program change right there. Now, so you could give that a try. So let me know if you have the MIDI communication going in. Here's the bank selector and the program change, and let me see if let's take a look, see if there is maybe a VL70 patch script. So we'll come over here to our MIDI device manager. Let's install a device. Yeah, so you could come right over here and choose your Yamaha VL70M. Hit OK. Here you want to tell where that particular MIDI, where that's connected, if it's connected by USB. I can't remember if it has USB. I think it may. Then you could just simply tell it to where that particular MIDI port is. So once we go to add a MIDI track, we can come right over here and say, okay, we want this output. And we can see that we have the Yamaha VL70M listed because we defined that again in the studio menu to more options to your MIDI device manager. So install device, scroll down, select the VL70M where it's connected to which MIDI port. And now when you come over, so we're going to just be able to come over here and we can see all your patch name presets that are on your VL70 right there. So now you can say, okay, I want that preset, and then your M audio should be sending MIDI information into this track as soon as it's record enabled, and then that MIDI information will pass out to your VL70. Okay. Okay. So we see, okay, so we see Danielle says the CC is no problem. The problem is channel and program change with buttons or a key or a fader. So, make sure that, the fader is probably going to be, if you want the fader to automatically, whatever is being transmitted by the You know, once you go into the MIDI monitor, whatever is being transmitted, you could see here. So you may have to change. So see if it's actually transmitting MIDI program changes and see if it's transmitting the information that you want, that you're expecting it to be transmitting. So if you hit the program change button, make sure that it's actually, you know, transmitting a MIDI program change in that it's coming out from the MIDI controller right there. So if you could let me know that, Daniela, it'd be great. Because usually faders don't do like channel or program change messages. So often you have like next program or previous program change. You could do that and that will transmit. All right. All right, so we see from Val, it says, so I have 2 SSDs now, and I want to move the VST3 content from the Steinberg instruments to the other one. According to the library manager, it's located there, but they are still, but in Explorer, they are still there. All right, so when we go to the library manager, all right, so, you know, check to see, like, once we are here, so let's say, okay, we go to, you know, Etude here, and go to the details, and you can see the path listed here in the details. If these are on the drive that you move to, so, you know, generally it moves it, it may leave. If you see that this is in the path that you are expecting it to be, you know, like where the new location is, you could always go back to the old location and at that point delete it. Sometimes what happens, and I ran into this with a client where, you know, they put it in their documents folder, and the documents folder was putting it in on their Mac OS, was putting it to iCloud automatically. It was backing up all of their documents to iCloud. So every time that the file wasn't seen, and probably OneDrive is very similar, that if you have your documents folder and that's where your content is, and you have that kind of in sync with a cloud-based solution, Dropbox, iCloud, OneDrive, Google Drive, that some of those settings may immediately resynchronize back to their original location. So this was causing all sorts of problems because he would delete the files and it's like then they show up again, and it was because of his iCloud that was synchronizing all of the documents in iCloud to the documents on his computer. So once he moved any files from his documents, it would, the next time in the background, it would start to resynchronize. So, but if what you see here is on the new drive, you could delete the old ones without any consequence. So, but just check in the details area right there. There you see Val says I do have Dropbox activated but excluded SSD thereon. Only instruments and samples like Splice, etc. Yeah. Yeah, so if it's still in the old location, you know, you should be able to delete those if it's not synced. All right. So we see from DaVinci Girl, it says, cool, I have 236 patches and it sounds with Patchman electronics or modifications sound incredible. All right, so. Okay. All right, so let's see. I think we had a couple questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the questions so far. All right, and we see Gareth is joined. All right, let me see if I didn't, make sure I didn't miss any other questions here. Maybe, I'm sorry, let me just go back. I think I may skip some here. Let me just check. All right. I think I may have jumped on me, so let me just see. Make sure I didn't miss a whole section here. All right, so I see a question from Val. It says, question, is there a way to render and place all selected tracks individually but not all signal path? It somehow can't figure that out. It always renders it out until the stereo out. All right, so let me just create just a quick project here. All right, so just create a couple quick multi-tracks here. All right, so let's just all right, so let's say so let's say on this, so we're going to have multiple tracks here. I'm going to put just an effects channel on this so we can make sure that we're excluding it or including it. So let me just create effects track. All right, so we have bass, kind of piano coming in. And we have some effects, so let's take a look at our okay. So we want to render replace selected tracks individually, but not all signal path. Somehow I can't figure out. It's always renders out until the stereo out. Okay. So and let me put on the bass as an. I guess we're okay. We got. I'll add the reverb here on the piano as well. So as we're playing. Okay, so I'm going to select these 3 tracks, and I'm going to go to my render in place. We'll go to our render settings, and I'll just choose dry. And I'm not going to mix these down. So usually when we select multiple, let me just make sure I'm going to just select the tracks. I had 1. So again, come over here to render in place. Let's get to our render settings. And I'm going to choose dry. So let's come over, render. Okay. So now when we come over here, we're going to have dry. And we go to, our piano is dry. But if we listen to this source, we hear the reverb. And we play this one. So, and as we do dry, like in the render settings, one of the things that may throw you off is that it copies over the channel settings. So, but let's say if I just want to do channel settings to those 3 tracks. So that means if I had a reverb here, I'll just undo that. So when we render it, the reverb that we have on this channel, like these channel settings, are automatically carried over to this channel. So if I go, let's say if I do that one more time, I undo and I put on like a obnoxious EQ here on the drums. When we go to select these and we make it dry, so again, edit, render in place, all of the channel settings, the EQs, the effects are going to be carried over. So you may hear it still with reverb. So we'll go to the render settings. I say dry, and this is, transfer channel settings. So we hit render. Now those are transferred over. So when we open up our channel MixConsole view here, and we say, okay, let's go to our EQ, that we will see kind of the same EQ curve, the same settings are always carried over with that. But if we choose to just render these, and we go to our render settings and we wanted to include those, we can now just come over. And if I just do channel settings, that won't carry over the effects. So when we go to listen to it, the effects aren't carried over. And when we go to, I had it muted, but then the channel settings aren't carried over for you. So check, just the settings right there. But you could do it dry, but the channel settings and routing and effects and EQs, channel strips can be just kind of copied over. But if you do just normal channel settings, those can be rendered into the file. And if you wanted these to just have no processing whatsoever, one of the things you could do is just kind of select. Let's see if we could just select, and we go to audio to bounce selection. Now we've consolidated all the events right there, even though there is multiple drum, multiple bass, and the one piano. So that excludes all of the processing options. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski checking in from Chico, and we have Captenergy music on. Let's see, Vince says, thanks a bunch, Greg. That is a skilled macro. I learn more about it every time. All right, we see Greg Malik says, figured out, he saved the settings as default, reopening, had my audio settings saved. All right. Bratman Studio says, Chatfield Jump sounds like a new dance craze. Yeah, that's what I get being 20 minutes behind the live stream. Sometimes it just likes to jump towards the end. All right, so Jeff Sabelski says he has a week to make sure his English horn reads, play some Bach on the 25th, organ concerto. Yeah, I have my orchestra concert. We're doing all Dvorak on Sunday. It's already sold out. All right, so Karin Thapa says, now it feels like a mess, specifically the mixer. Thank you for knowledge. All right, Tim Weinheimer just comments, says this hangout was very helpful to watch after as well. So much information and help. Thanks again for all the help. So we see Jeff Sabelski says, would tariffs affect software prices from Japan? So the software is not sold through Japan, so it's actually, so now all in America, all of the software is kind of sold through our online provider. I think it's FastSpring. And I don't think any of the tariffs have had any effects on software sales because it's not a physical product that we sell. It's just really a download access code. So I think we've been immune from tariffs, but it's been an interesting challenge for many of my colleagues that work more on the Yamaha hardware side. All right. But I think we've been kind of spared so far. All right, we see John Koskinen just saying complicated things remind me to be patient with myself, and that's why we're here. All right, Bratman Studio says, I can't seem to find the names for each part of the Cubase 14 UI. I see channel, inspector, visibility, but then what's the official names for the columns for the instruments, tracks, etc.? So I believe that this is going to be just, let's see, what would we call it? Like our, I've had to name it. So we see inspector, we see obviously the events. I would just call this maybe the track controls area. So, because when we right click here, just kind of keep terminology consistent, we always have the track control settings. So, and that allows us to configure what settings. So maybe the track list or track controls area. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we have Randy from Radar, the band, joining from Dallas-Fort Worth area. So Jeff Sabelski is just mentioning my cat will get out of the shoebox if I put a smaller shoebox next to it. Yeah, he was trying to get into like a 3 by 5 inch shoebox box before, so I brought the other shoebox, which looked way too small, but he fit right in somehow. All right, Windy Shore 74 asks, hi Greg, is there a way to stop overlapped events being muted when doing create tracks from lanes? So yeah, they're going to show up as muted because they are muted themselves. And I haven't found a way of doing it other than kind of globally selecting, but I'll show you like a quick easy way of doing it. So let's say when we come over here and we have let's look at our lanes. So we just okay, so now we see our lanes. Now if I want, so we see that one of these is active and the rest of these lanes are muted until you grab the tool. So once you select one, the other elements are muted. So if we select our lanes here and we right click and choose to create tracks from lanes. So I think if we just grab the mute tool, that we could unmute and kind of lasso around all of them, that all of them can be muted or unmuted. But since they are muted, and I could see, you know, the logic behind it is when you do that, you may not want to hear, you know, 6 versions of the same thing. But if you're doing like maybe a gang background vocal type of process, then, you know, you want to turn them on. But instead of having to mute each one, you know, select the mute tool, and then you could just kind of lasso to mute or unmute all of the events like that. So I kind of understand the logic of it, but it's, you know, you don't have to do each one by one by one by one. You could just kind of select multiple events pretty easily with the mute tool. Okay, wonderful to see Gareth on. It says, don't forget to sequence the like. Hope you're doing well, Gareth. Says, hi Greg, hope you're well. Not completely overwhelmed by those 33 tracks. I think I have about 3 more done. I have a symphony concert on Sunday, and I should have next week to get things dialed in. So I have kind of rough ideas to do some final tweaks and make sure I like the bass lines and stuff. But I'm getting it started. All right, Permanent Green says, hi Greg, are we still able to use the AXR4U interface with Cubase 14 and the latest Mac OS X? I see some notes on the website, but not sure exactly what to do. Thank you. So yeah, I don't think there's any issues with that because it's kind of using the Yamaha Steinberg USB driver. So it's kind of a common driver for Yamaha and Steinberg hardware products. And as long as, you know, so I'm running it currently on my Windows 11. So I don't think you have any problems running on the latest Mac OS X. I'd be happy to hook it up to my Mac laptop over the weekend. And I think I just got the latest OS. Kind of mess some things up. But if I go to, just to make sure, but if I go to about this Mac, so I'm running, make sure I have the right, so I'm running Sequoia 15.4.1. I'd be happy to kind of connect it real quick and just test it, but I don't think you'll have any problems with it. So. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted Gareth 1 gallon of Texas Best Blackberry ice cream. We'll call it 3.2 liters for Gareth's benefit. All right. All right, Patrick Emanuel A just says, hi Greg, happy to be here. How to do pitch bend with drum sounds. So some drum instruments will allow you to do pitch bend. So let's take a look. Let's see. And sometimes drum instruments won't follow pitch bend data at all. So so let's come over here. And sometimes it's like the individual drums. So let's come over. So let's start with a Groove Agent track here. All right, so let me just drop that in. And All right, so now a lot of times what we could do is, like, drums may make more sense. Let's see if we just draw in some pitch bend here. So let's just play this. All right, so let's say, I think in Groove Agent what you could do is just kind of come over here. So let's say we want to edit, and then if we go to pitch, what you could do is just come over and say, okay, I want to go to so let's say if I want to automate that. So now when we go back, and if I wanted to take, like, let's say the shakers, this sound, and I wanted to randomize the pitch, I could select just that pad. And let's say if I want to come over here to pitch on this particular instrument, I could just say, okay, I want to set up a pitch envelope. So you could just come over here and be able to adjust pitch bend. So that way you could kind of draw it in, but most drum machines won't. And let's take a quick look at, and I think that we could do something similar in the new drum machine. So let's add a drum track here. So let's say as we go to a pattern here, I'll just mute this and let's just randomly generate a pattern. So if it's pitch bend specifically that you want, let's see if we convert this to MIDI. If this instrument responds to pitch bend. Because a lot of times you may not want all the instruments or just like hi-hats to respond. Yep, so it looks like that particular instrument will respond. So let's come over here, let's join these together. So if we want to gradually change this, I'll just grab my line tool. So if you use the drum machine, you could do that, or within the drum machine, you could also do individual pads as well for different pitch bend control. All right. Okay, we see it's Dravech says, is there a way to randomize panning? So I have an ostinato and I want notes to bounce all over the stereo spectrum. Is this possible? Thank you, Greg. All right, so let's say I want to take here, I'll just, so we could set up like a modulator for it if we wanted to. So let me just delete my, let's say we'll take this particular pattern here. So let's say I want to take this. Just get rid of the pitch bend. Okay, so let me just put this into quick. All right, so let's say I have my panner here. All right, so what we could do is just kind of come over, let's get to a modulator, and we could say, okay, let's just come over, and I think there's even a random. So I'll come over here, let's adjust, let's say our panning. And I think if we go to we could apply randomness here. So we could adjust kind of our modulator up. And we could so this way we could just kind of choose. If we want to be bipolar or unipolar. So you could play around with and just use like a modulator just to randomize different elements like that. And there's also, if you didn't want to go the modular route, we could probably also see if the panner just find the auto pan. You could have this randomized, and if we want this to be synced, but if you want it to be, yeah, so you could just kind of click on random here and so let's say we want this to be quarter notes. So that's another approach that you could take as well using the AutoPan plugin. There you see DJ FK says he's learning a lot today. So we see Gunzo Capo 10. It says maybe says we are you from. So if it's directed toward me, I'm in the United States, just out in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside Washington D.C. All right, so a question, hi Greg and community, is from hi Cheryl, who's in DC area, Maryland, I believe. Just wondering how I copy the Cubase Orchestral template and place it in my template instead of reinventing the wheel. Thanks. All right, so let's say if we're doing a new project, come over here, say Symphonic Orchestra, so we'll open up, we'll create a project using this. So if I wanted to make it my template, so we'll come over here, so we'll have this kind of set up. So, all right, so we see this as our template. So if I wanted to save this in my templates, I think we could just come right over here, save as template. All right. So we'll say okay. And now when I go to close that, let's do new template. I'll do new project. And we go to more. So we could just come over here, and then we've kind of appropriated the orchestral template, and we could incorporate it directly into our own template as we work. So let me know if that's what you want to do. So once you have the template loaded, then just do save as template, and it should show up. Like when we go to new project, you should see it right under here under the hub with the name that you gave it. All right, so we see from Dravich, says for chord pads, doing step entry, how do you change how often a chord is entered? It works every measure, but I want it to be entered every quarter note. Thank you. Okay, so let's just do new project here. So it might be tied to your, let me just create empty, sorry about that. All right, so let's go over here to, let's add a chord track. All right, let's go to our chord pads. All right, so I'm going to go to turn on step entry. Let me just kind of zoom in here. Let's set our grid here to beat. Let me see if there's any. So it still looks like it's on. All right, so we come here, we can. Yeah, so it looks like that might be. Now I know that if we are. All right, let me see if there's any. All right, that's all for the MIDI remote. Let me just go. So I know that if we have this set, you know, if we're in the chords here, that we could just, because usually it's kind of tight. Let me see if it's. So I know if we come and we drop the chords in, it's not going to be tied to the quantized settings. So say if I'm here, let me just check, see if, like, while we're in the key editor, because it looks like it. Right, so here it's going to be just on the bar. Just going to open a quick instrument track here. All right, and now if we activate, it's going to be based on the quantization in the editors, based on the quantized values. So now if I switch this to quarter notes, it will be quarters. So if I come, let's. And then if I switch it in the MIDI editor to like a different quantize, so now if I want to do 30-second notes, and we have the step entry on, and now it's going to do 30-second notes. So maybe because it's on the transport bars, I don't see a setting to change the value. I know you could always drag and drop the chords in. So let's say if I'm here and I want that to be, just turn off my step entry here. So if I want to physically just kind of drag the chords to the beat, we could do that, but it looks like the step entry may be limited to just to measures. But you can drag. I'll make sure to mention that as a point to the development team, see if that could follow the same logic as either the snap for the quantize. Let me just see if there's. I don't think there's many other settings to adjust for that. But I'll make sure to pass that along as. It seems like we should be able to have that be switchable. So sorry about that. I'll make sure to mention that and bring it to their attention. All right. So FlyV says, One more macro to bug you with, Greg. Please, key command that will reduce breaths in audio. All right, so let me open up a project that has lots of good breaths in it. This is actually easier to do since version 13 and 14. So let me just come over here. So I used to have to make a very complex macro to do this, and now it's not as needed with a lot of the functions. So a lot of times when you're, kind of de-breathing a vocal. So let's listen to this here.
What did you say? You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day.
So here.
You were the party, the big events. I was your everything.
All right, so we want to kind of minimize the breaths. So let's say if you want to come over here, so we'll just kind of listen to the first line here.
What did you say?
All right, so we want to get in. Sometimes when there's compression during the recording or tracking, the vocals kind of get pumped up, the breaths get pumped up. So let's go ahead and make a macro. So what I want to do is just come over, and I'm going to select just that breath part with the range tool. So I want to take this breath. So now that I have it selected, let's go over here to our key command. So let's make a minimize breaths. So make a new macro. We'll stop shouting about it. All right. Okay, so I want to take that selected range, and what I want to do, because I think we could just, now we choose decrement, event volume, and every time we do one of these functions, it's going to do it 1 dB. So let me add that command, and I'm just going to try to add that command like 10 times, something like that. Okay, so let's see if I did it right. So say we want to minimize the breaths, we can come over here. And so now that would just automatically come right over there. So let's say we're going to...
You wished it all.
All right, so now whatever I select with the range tool here, run the macro, boom. And so now, because sometimes taking the breaths out entirely sounds really unnatural, just because, it's like a light switch that goes on and off when it needs to kind of just be dimmed down.
What did you say? You wished it all away, and I...
So just kind of select the range here, run the macro, and that would automatically just kind of trim.
All away, and I'm left here for...
So let's say, right here. And then if you have to, you could run it twice as well, if it's like in a bad spot. So
I'm left here for 1,000.
So right there, let's say. So let's just grab that and run the macro. So really the macro, I just, and it's been simplified. And I think, it could have been one of those things where I made kind of an extensive macro to show how kind of to do it. And then some of the people at Steinberg may have just made it easier so that you wouldn't have to run a macro. So we list this in context.
You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a...
So let's say we have nasty breath right here. So we just kind of go through, select the range, and again, just run that macro. and
1,000 years and a day.
So you could do that. Now it's also like, and why I made a macro initially was because, taking just a little range, it wasn't nearly as easy just to do this as it used to be. So that's why I kind of made a macro. But if you select the range and just come over to the macro here for minimize breaths and just do it like 10 or 12 times, then you could just drop it and de-breath your vocal in a minute or two. Michael Teams is on fire with ice cream today. Gareth is confirming that it is me, Greg. So, all right. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl says, I looked for the download of the VL70M editor. It's no more available. Can you organize one for me, Greg? So let me know if it was an official Yamaha one. I don't think it's probably still supported. But, so I'm not sure if it's being still supported by Yamaha or not, but if you tell me like if it was a official Yamaha one, I don't remember, Yamaha VLM70 editor, but I never had one, so I may not have looked for it. But if it is, I might be able to reach out to some colleagues, so you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, it is Mr. Clip's birthday today, so everyone wish Mr. Clips a happy birthday. Thanks for sharing part of your birthday with us on the live stream. Hope you have a wonderful day of celebration. All right. Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of Scoopies Black Diamond ice cream. Sounds like a bad ski accident waiting to happen, but thank you. It's very generous. All right, Gareth asks, I have a question. Says, Sir Greg, are there features that incorporate an easy setup of Groove Agent in a pattern event, i.e. all the pads set up in the note list? Yeah, we covered this last live stream, actually. So we'll show it to you here. So let's come over, let's say we do a new project. We'll create empty. So I'm going to add an instrument track. We'll add a Groove Agent SE, and I'm going to turn it into a pattern event. So we'll add our track. All right, so we see kind of a generic, C, C sharp, D, etc. We don't see names. So I'm going to load up a kit. So I'll just load up a kit here so we see our pad names. And what I'm going to do is in the routing tab, let's come over here to the drum map. I'm going to say, and as we do this, if you watch the names here, I'm going to say create drum map from instrument. And now we could just click on the plus sign and we could just add a number of different instruments. So as we come over, we could see the names for our drums here. So now we could just kind of come over and all of the names from the Groove Agent kit have now been populated directly into the pattern editor. So let me know if that's what you're looking for, Gareth. All right. All right, reading through comments here, and then I just had a chat field move on me. All right. All right, so thinking back. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl says you're aware that OBS for streaming will not support VST3. Complete streaming solution will be fine inside of Cubase. So, we'll see what happens, but I'm not sure if we're going to be doing video streaming, And I think, I saw a comment that, just no one because OBS is open source and no one's just done VST3. So, but a lot of times, I don't run any VST plugins inside of OBS. Do it inside of Cubase. All right, so John Barry just mentioning he has a VL on his EX5R. Yeah, it was a great module. And it's really expressive, as is his virtual analog and his AN1X. All right, so I think they say a comment from Jazz Dude. Has you guys seen the new Concert Grand Piano plugin? Sounds great. Let me just see if it's the Etude. Yes, it's Etude. So let's take a listen to Etude real quick. So I'll just replace it in context from another project here. All right, so I still have it kind of set up. All right, so we do Etude. It's a Yamaha Grand Piano, I believe. So, and this runs inside of Halion or Halion Sonic. So, just give you kind of idea. And we'll just go ahead and listen to it in context. So I believe it's on sale for $79, but it's good to listen to a couple of the presets. So you have different settings for the piano, where you adjust the release, resonance, the sympathetic, different tuning options, how you want the dynamics to be controlled, whether you want it to be for the velocity contours. how much pedal noise, release noise, attack noise. There's also, you could adjust like the player perspective, tail, room, reverb settings, and your effects that you could access right over here. Again, and sits really super well in a mix, as you can hear. There's a lot of great presets kind of work for. So, wonderful pianos. Check out Etude. It's on kind of an introductory sale. So it's 18 gigabytes, but compressed from 45 gigabytes. Very easy on CPU from running it inside of Halion or Halion Sonic. All right. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl who asks, when I move MIDI from MuseScore, always Cubase setup. Halion I do not use, and like Halion, can I stop with Halion? It always is loaded. So all you have to do is just a preference. So if you go to your preferences or settings and go to MIDI file, and here we can say under import options, you could just choose for it to just go to MIDI tracks or instrument tracks as opposed to Halion Sonic multi-timbral. So just choose like instrument tracks or MIDI tracks, and then it won't load up the general MIDI bank from Halion Sonic. All right, Nexus asks, my Steinberg driver for UR22 starts out great. After 10 minutes, I get a bit crusher sound when playing anything back. I unload and reload the driver and it works again. Any ideas why and how to fix this? My drivers are updated to the latest version. So generally, when we hear stuff like that, it sounds almost like the USB port is maybe going into like a power management mode, or kind of like an eco-friendly green mode. So sometimes the USB ports, and the UR22 is USB bus powered. So if there is kind of an interruption where sometimes, the USB bus powered will be throttled down to make your battery life longer on, so even if it's a desktop, it'll just kind of do it to save energy. So I would look into any of the power management options on your USB ports, and it could be in your BIOS of your PC, and make sure that you have those power management disabled for your USB ports. If it's connected to a USB hub, make sure it's a powered hub. It sounds like kind of a USB power issue. Often when I hear about that, that's what's kind of the cause. All right. All right, radar of the band. Randy's just very happy that it's Friday. It's FYI Yay Day. So it's kind of learn new stuff on Fridays. Okay, Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, could you please give me back to basics guide on auditioning a groove agent beat, importing it, play it, plus fills as events, and splitting to separate parts? I'm sure I'm overcomplicating it. All right, so let's just start new. All right, so we'll start off with instrument track. So we'll just load up Groove Agent SE. All right, and I want to do it just quickly as a MIDI track here. All right. All right, so let's come over, let's say, okay, so we could load a kit. We could load a kit with patterns. So let's say I just want to audition some different patterns here. Okay, so I have this pattern. All right, so what we could do now, I have the pattern selected. If we see this little tab over here, if we want to go search for like styles, I can say, okay, let's try like jazz style. So we say, okay, let's do like a fusion. So when we go to our styles, we could load up kind of different styles here. So say, okay, I want to do let's say our fusion pattern here. Okay, so once we have a pattern, you know, we could, if I click on follow transport, it can play this pattern and I could adjust my tempo down. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 98 beats a minute. We'll make it 96. All right, so if I have follow transport, like when I hit play, Groove Agent plays. When I hit stop, Groove Agent stops playing. So now to get these patterns in, all I had to do is drag over. So say I want to do, and you could click on the patterns. So say I want to drag an intro, and then I want to have a 1-bar fill. Then everyone's going to come in. Let's say for like 8 bars here. Let's do another pattern, and I want to take this fill, so we could drag these over. So now when I'm going to turn the follow transport off, because we have the, you know, because right now the MIDI notes are inside a Groove Agent and it has its own kind of internal player sequencer. So I'm going to disactivate this because we have the notes inside of Cubase. So hit play. So now if we want to split these up into like different tracks, one is, you know, you may not need to because we have a mixer. If you're using like the Beat Agent kit, here we could have kind of its own mixer. So if I want snare softer, and we may have it in the overheads. So if I want snare louder, now I want to bring in the overheads. Now I want the room mic, but if we have like I could come over here and say, okay, I want to add reverb. So let's get to put that on aux send 1. So when we get to the mixer, I can come over to the agent. Now this is all still going out of a stereo mix. So, you know, we have a mixer here that's being summed to here. But if I say, okay, I want the reverb, the snare going out of output 2, my hi-hat going out of output 3, we have 32 stereo outs to our mixer. And I want my room mic going to output 5, my overhead's going to output 4. And now as we play, you know, we could have all these sounds being kind of mapped out into our mixer. I could even take the effects. So let's come over here to the effects, and then we could, you know, send the effect output as well. So we could send those to different outs. And now if we choose to just kind of, you know, render these, so say I select this track and we go to, since they're being bussed out to different outputs, we can go to render in place. We'll say let's do the complete signal path and export. And we could choose to mix it down, or if I come over here, we could also, just when we do our render in place, we could choose to, if we choose complete signal path, at that point we could have each of the tracks with their different outputs automatically output to different channels. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. So we see John Barry just says, on a little side note, he just upgraded the wheels on his chair, so he's having a wood floor fitted. What a difference, even on carpet. Amazing improvement. Yeah, sometimes the little ergonomic things can make a big difference. But thanks for sharing that, John. All right, great to see Jazzy Lamel on. All right, Gareth just says, I've noticed when I accidentally open a group of selected chords in the chord track, it starts some scary process of finding thousands of chord progressions and freezes for a while. So it could be, so let's go back to this. So it could be, let's say if we come here to this chord, so maybe if maybe you have the chord assistant on, so let me know if maybe the chord assistant is enabled. You know, so you can have a list editor here, but it doesn't seem to be, kind of misbehaving, but it could be depending on your chord track. So sometimes it may be doing an analysis of before, previous, and next chords to kind of work with. So it might be trying to figure out a chord that fits in between two chords. And Gareth just did it. So. All right, Artist Knows Love wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, so let me see if I can recreate Gareth's thing. So, but maybe it's just trying to. So let's see if we go to make a chord here. But if you have a video of it, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it. But I mean, here I get like a lot of different chord suggestions, but it's, you know, maybe a pretty straightforward progression. So all right, Neil Conway is wishing everyone a wonderful weekend. All right, so we see Jasmine Mel asks, hey Greg, I have a beat that was imported and recorded with all separate track outs, and I'm trying to see if there's a way to make the beat faster from 90 to 96 beats per minute without editing each file or time stretch. Okay, so we'll show you how to do this. Okay, so let's say we're here, like in this example, so make sure, you know, that when you go into the pool window under media, we go to the pool window, that we could select all of the files here. Make sure that, you know, if they're all at 90 beats per minute, make sure that the tempo setting here is for 90 beats a minute. And then you could come over and place them all in musical mode. So right now this song is at 100 beats per minute. Okay, so let's say if I'm here. So now that all the files are in musical mode, again, go to the pool command or control plus P. Make sure that the tempo is set to 90, that it's in musical mode. So right now I'm at 100, so if I want to go from 100 to 106, I could just go to the tempo and type in. So I want it to be 124. I want it to be 88. Then the files will play back at the time. So make sure that you have the origin time and that all the files are in musical mode. And then you could just type in a new tempo and the files will automatically follow the new tempo for you. Okay. All right. Val has a weird question. Says, can we change the track name font size? So I think it's fixed. I'm pretty sure it's fixed depending, you know, if you have different screen resolutions, you know, it could appear larger or smaller depending on your screen resolution. But if we go to track control settings, I don't think it's adjustable. When we go to the name, so we could adjust the width, but not necessarily the vertical height of it. So we can see the width, but not the height. So I think it's going to be a fixed size for the track name. So, but it may change in perception, the size in perception, depending upon your screen resolution. So I'm running a 1920 by 1080 resolution currently. Okay. All right, we see in Cubase 13 there used to be a way to explode chords into separate tracks. That process is not in Cubase 14. Any chance they'll bring that back? Thank you. So I know it's one of the things that didn't make it in the score editor in Cubase 14 when it kind of migrated to the Dorico-based engine. So I know that the team is aware of it, but they haven't announced when, or they haven't announced that it's coming back. But I know that the team is very aware of the people's use of that particular function. So let me see. Jazz Dude posted video, so we'll take. All right, so maybe that video Jazz Dude posted, I'll take a look at it afterwards. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, Rick here. I have a track. It was named Guitar. Then I changed that track to Sax. Different sound too. Same notes. The track control says Sax, but the events say Guitar. How to change that to Sax? Okay, so let's say my event name is Kick, and I change this, let's say, to Bass Drum. Okay, so the track has been changed, but the events on that track are still like Kick 07 that we see here. So to do that, double click in the name field, hold down the Control or Command key, keep it pressed down, and then hit Enter. And then the track name will be carried over to the events. So again, double click, type in your name, hold down Control or Command, keep it pressed down, and then hit Enter. And then the track name will be updated to the events on that particular track. All right, so we see from Val, just says, yeah, since we could drag down the clip gain, it's amazingly easy, but the clip gain fader in the bottom left definitely cost me a lot of time because of muscle memory of 15 years. Another method that you could do if you just have the, so I think if you just come, you can, there's you could set up a keyboard shortcut to also, as you hover, to just adjust your clip gain volume. So you could do that with a keyboard shortcut as well. But yeah, so once you kind of get the new spot, it'll take, we know it takes a little bit of time to get used to as well. So. You see Gareth just apologize for missing the last live stream. No worries. Just glad you're here in this one. All right, so we see from Cornell, it says, is there a quick way to assign every instrument in a kit to a separate audio channel groove agent? Well, there's 32 stereo outs and 128 instruments. So there's not kind of like, because if you do it for, so there isn't, I'll take a look and see, but there's, the potential for more, so it's not going to be a one-to-one relationship. And if we are, but one of the things that you could do is, let's say if we have an instrument track here, so let's say we load up a Groove Agent SE, and let's say if we have our, we can save kind of the outputs routing. So let's say if we come over, Okay, so let's say I have this set up where my kick is, out 2, snare out 3, out 4 for hats. Let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So let's say I have these outputs in this mixer, so we can't save this. So I'm going to come over. I think if we go to so, but we could save the mixer here as a preset. Let me see if I remember how to do this, but I thought it was over here. So let's save a preset. So we'll call this multi-out. Okay, so I'm going to just load up a brand new instance of Groove Agent. All right, let's load up, let's say, a Simon Phillips kit here. All right, so we get to the mixer, and now I want to recall my multi-outs. Let me just... see if it shows up in here. Yeah, so you can recall the preset. Let me just see if it's like if I'm here, and let's say if I'm switch between different presets, if that maintains the outs. And now I could just come over here to multi-out. So when I go to load up a particular kit, we could save the outputs as a configuration so that we could do further. So while there isn't a way to necessarily always have that like map multiply, you can't save it as a preset once you've done it once, and then that preset could be accessed later. Okay, John Barry says Cubase is like the ultimate snap-on tool cabinet. It has tools you may never use, but it's nice to know you have them just in case, or if someone else comes into your workshop and needs that too. That's a great analogy, John. I'll use that in the future and give you credit. All right, John Barry just asked, hi Greg, can we load patterns from the pattern editor back into Groove Agent as a pattern? Okay, so let's just come over, let's add, I'm gonna come over here, let's get to our, let's add one more instance of Groove Agent, and we're gonna set it to a pattern event. Okay, I'm just gonna load quick. Okay, so now go into the editor and we'll extract our drum map. Okay, I'll remove remove these tracks just for clarity. Okay, so I'm going to create a pattern here. I'll just quickly randomize. All right, so now I'm going to drag this pattern out into the project window. All right, I'm going to convert this pattern to MIDI. And now let's go to our pattern here. I'm going to clear the pad. So I'm going to cut the pad. So there's no pattern there. I'm going to drag this MIDI from the project window and now trigger that. So once you have the pattern, so if we go to the pattern editor here, drag that to the project window, convert it to MIDI, then drag the MIDI event to a pattern pad in Groove Agent. It's kind of a cool random pattern. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Grant Nicholas on from Baltimore. Hope you're doing well, buddy. All right. All right, DigiBeats Music says, hi Greg, can I put a MIDI part with drums into the pattern editor to edit? So currently we can't go into the pattern editor from MIDI, but we could go the opposite way to go from the pattern editor into and convert that to MIDI. But it's only kind of one direction, so and it doesn't seem like it's the one you want currently. So maybe in the future, we'll see what happens. All right. See, Val says his biggest upgrade of the day, 1700 milliliter Stanley Cup. Feels so American. Yeah. Evidently, the girls in my son's 6th grade class, they're all into Yeti versus Stanley Cups. It's the big thing that the girls are into, supposedly. My son expresses his frustration that they don't talk about other things. All right, Roland Stuff says, many thanks, Greg. Clear and concise as always. You just saved me workflow time handling Groove Agent. I was overcomplicating it. Thanks again. So glad it was an easy solution. All right. You see, Gareth says, I think it's trying to work out all the progressions of the chord selected. I've opened a ticket with support and specifically select the assistant. Yeah, if you want to email me a project, Gareth, where it's acting up and what you did, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right. Reading through. See, Cornell is just saying auto-magically indeed. All right. All right, John Barry's just mentioning, and maybe it was with fonts, that there's a bold setting for fonts in the preferences if memory serves me well. Let's take a quick look. See if we can find that. Maybe under event display. yeah, maybe the track name font width. So if we do that, let's look at the track names. So let me open up project with more tracks. So if we look at this, you can see our track names is bold. So that might help. Thanks, John. And we'll go to the regular font. So you can see it's a little more subdued than bold. All right. All right, let's see. All right, reading through comments. See a lot of great discussion on Serum. All right, so you see John Barry says, cheers, Greg. Thanks for that. Perfect. This is Gerald Ely says, saving patterns to a Groove Agent pad is a great tip. All right, Paul D. He's talking about Arturia collection. All right. Gerald Ely says, Greg's son is frustrated with what girls are talking about. Get used to it, bro. So I'm sure the girls are frustrated with what the boys are talking about too. So it's that wonderful age. All right. All right, so we see Val already had his track names in bold. All right, Bratman Studio just says, Greg, I went into the download assistant, noticed some updates I hadn't noticed. Guess I should look there more often. And also you could take a look at the, just when you go to, a new project, you get the news over here, like as you're kind of starting Cubase. So there's lots of, you'll see some update notifications here. There's the Cubase maintenance update, video modulator is what's new. So often you'll see stuff in there, but. All right, so see Gareth just mentioned the Yamaha GS1. So I think that's like the big space organ thing. I remember that's one I'm thinking of. It's got to play Stevie Wonder's once. It was kind of cool. All right, you see Gareth also mentioned the Waldorf microwave. Brings back lots of memories. All right, so let's jump to a couple questions that were mailed in. All right, so the first question it says, I'd recorded vocals with the looping into separate lanes. I've selected the best from the lanes and plays back fine. I bounced it, and the resulting audio has not waveforms showing, and even though I can hear the performances, I can't see anything in the audio editor or use Very Audio. There doesn't seem to be anything in the pool that I could use to rescue this. Do I have to re-record everything using a different choice, or what to do when looping? I've been using Cubase forever, but I've never been recording audio much. I've enjoyed the many hours at Club Cubase. Your deep knowledge of masterful advice is a model for corporate support. All right, so let's take a look. I don't think I've had issues bouncing, but rendering in place, there could be some things that could cause it. So let's say if we are here, activate this project. Let me revert the project. All right, so let's say I'm here and let's say I did I'll just do a super ugly comp. Alright, so say this is my comp. Now often what I do when I'm comping, I will duplicate the track version here. And I'm going to select this and just go to my audio and choose bounce selection. And you can see that I see the waveform as expected. If I need to go back to redo the comp, it's all right there in that track version. And I have a track version that's not comped together, but is kind of the final file. Now, if for some reason you don't see the waveform, one of the things that you could do is go into the pool window, and often you may notice that you may see like the image. So sometimes if you may right click if it seems like you're hearing your comp but you're not seeing the waveform. If you kind of come over here, there's usually an option. See if you see the waveform image in the pool, and that's from the media menu or control or command plus the letter P as in pool. And often if there's like a wave, because there's like an image file that's associated with each wave file. So when we come over, one of the things you could do is there's kind of redo the image, or generate the thumbnail cache, and that may show you the image if it's for some reason it's not there. Something else that you could do, if the audio is playing back, just come over here, go to add track. Let's add, if it's a mono source, you could add a mono group, or stereo, add a stereo group. So let's say this is mono. I'm going to come over and I'm going to make the configuration mono. I'm going to choose this, and we're going to send this to a group. So now this audio is going to a group. I'm going to add a mono audio track, and we're going to set group 1 as its input. So not the output. Sorry, let's do stereo out. And for its audio input, group 1. So we'll call this comp capture. All right, so I'm going to enable record. So basically we're routing the audio to the group. The output of the group is routed into this. And now I'm just going to hit record. So, and then you should that's basically creating an audio recording from the comp. So that way you could see the image if it was recorded fine. But yeah, give those suggestions a try and let me know how it works out for you. All right. So we had another question on how to colorize tracks by name. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, so if we want to like quickly colorize a lot of different track names, so I'm going to come over. So like a lot of people, bass drum is always this color, snare is always this, bass is this color, guitar is this color, vocal is this color. So if we want to set up kind of different conventions for coloring based upon the name of the track, we could do this using our we're just using our project logical editor. So we'll come over here. So let's say in this, I want to rename like drums, bass and guitars. So let's create a couple of project logical editor presets. So we'll come over and we're going to say we're going to transform. We're going to say media type. We'll say container type is equal to track, or what we could actually just come over here and say name contains, and we'll say kick, and then we could just kind of come over. Now when we do this, we want to just kind of change this Boolean condition from and to or. So here we're going to say name contains, and let's say there's different spelling or people K-I-K for kick. Name contains, so we'll say name contains snare. Name contains hat. Name contains, let's say, SNR for snare. Name contains tom. Name contains, so we kind of get the idea here. So let's say name contains ride. Name contains room. We'll say, so we'll say room. Name contains, so you could do different derivations. Say symbol. All right, so, and then we could say we want to take those names and then we want to set color. So at this point we could say we want to set it to a fixed value and I want all my drums to be red. Okay, so we'll say save this as a preset. Okay, now we want to come over and let's say we want our bass to be blue. So we will remove some, okay, and I'm going to come over here and change this to or for all of these. Sorry, I messed that up. Okay. Okay, so now when I run this, anything that has these names, we can now just come over and we can make, like we just made those all blue. So let's say my bass, I want to be red now. So I'm going to, let's delete. Okay, so name, again, we'll just come over here. name contains bass. And we'll make this red. Okay, save as preset. And now we want this to be for guitar. Or GTR. We'll say acoustic guitar, so okay, so, and we'll change the Boolean condition here, so we'll say guitar color. And so you could break out all of your different tracks like this, and what I'm going to do now is just to run these as a macro. So we'll come over here to edit. So we go to our key commands, generate a new macro. We'll call it colorize tracks. So we'll say red. So add that, and we'll say base color. So now all you'd have to do is just kind of come over here and then run the macro, and then you could change. So let's say if we changed all these colors here, you could just kind of pick the names. So say these are all green, and the bass will come over here. So now once you create those presets with the different naming conventions, you could just say run macro, and then you could have all of the tracks, all the selected tracks here, just immediately change to different colors just by running that macro. All right, let's jump back to our questions. All right, see Gareth is going out for dinner, might be back by the time you wrap up. All right, we have Jan checking in from Denmark. He's using Cubase 13 Pro. I hope everyone is doing well. Thanks for joining us today. Cornell says he keeps forgetting about Project Logical Editor. Such a cool feature. Should start using it. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions. I'm going to give it a minute. I'm going to go say hi to my son real quick. I'll be back just a second. All right, see if there's more questions. All right, let's take a look. All right, Jan Nielsen says, experienced something strange. I made a sound on the Arturia CS80 soft synth at 192 hertz, 192 kilohertz. And when I loaded the same sound at 96 kilohertz, it was almost a different sound. It's much cleaner at 192 kilohertz. How? Yeah, so sometimes, we notice this with sound designers. A lot of sound designers, like, we came out with the AXR audio interfaces. They were at 384K, and people were like, oh, it's just ridiculous. It's, it's so impractical, 384K sample rate. But what makes a big difference is, like, when we do lots of different algorithms, especially for time stretching, if you have 384 kilohertz of information, even though you don't hear it, when you do an extreme edit, if you're like slowing something down by, 400%, having more data present can make a significant difference in the quality of time stretching algorithms. So, running some of the stuff at 192K can make a difference, especially with different filters, because, while it's kind of theoretically off of our hearing scale, it just makes the other overtones that are within our hearing scale more obvious to us. So you can often hear a difference with that. All right, we see Michael Teams. It says dinner time, and Gareth is back from dinner. All right. Michael Teams is implying that perhaps Gareth had pizza with the pizza emoji. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. And we'll be having I think it's going to be the 30th of the month, will be our next Zoom meetup. The last live stream will be 2 weeks from today. All right, and Gareth had a veggie curry. All right, give it another minute or so, see if we have more questions. If not, we'll wrap up, and we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. All right, so we've got Artist Knows Loved to saying thanks and wants everyone to be safe. Okay, so I guess we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. All right, I just see a quick question. Paul D says, I think Windows itself can only do a maximum of 96K, right? So now you could do 384K on Windows as well. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios says, thanks, Greg, that trick worked. All right, so Lawrence asks, Greg, if I could sneak it in based on your colors macro, could you also add folders and groups with that? I think so. If you have like a list of colors that you want, I'd be happy and say, okay, it's going to be, because I think you could open up all the, that the tracks, I think it would still work within folders. And you could always, within a Project Logical editor, open up all of the folders and then color and close the folders, because there's a pre and post process with that. Okay. So you see from Gareth says, if you have any questions on tracks, give me a shout. So yeah, I'm going to I have kind of the orchestra concert, the last one for the season this time, but I was thinking of doing a couple of string bass parts on it as well, orchestra bass. So. All right, so I guess we are out of questions now. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Everyone, and we'll see you then. Take care. Goodbye.